talking about technology and innovation, digital transformation, right, and manufacturing. So we have Mike here. Everybody knows Mike, right? So yeah, again, thank you for coming. We're really glad you came. We're really glad you're here. So Mike,
okay,
you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you. Let me begin by saying, and I called Kim today, and I said, I need to let you know it's been a pleasure working with you, because she's done such a phenomenal job, professional job. We deal with a lot of folks, and this one was easy. So again, Kim, thank you so much. Really great job. Yeah. The other thing is I wore my Betamore shirt, okay? Now you say, why is that? Well, because it's bright, it's cheery, and it's kind of outside of the box type of thing. When I walked in, the guard said, boy, I like your shirt. Well, I go back a long ways with Betamore, with Jen, and when she was over at City Garage, and she did some great things. And whenever I think about Betamore, I know the more probably stands for Baltimore, but I think it's also could stand for more than what exists. You guys are pioneers. Betamore has always been the pioneer group. They've been sort of like the artists of economic development. They're the ones that are saying, you know what, we know what's out there, but we're going to take it a step further. So I love that culture, and I love the fact that you have that kind of spirit of moving us, our communities, you know, to the next level. Thank you for inviting me. Michelle Welly, thank you for including me in this. I'm going to make one quick remark before we get to the panel and the questions. And by the way, even though we have a panel, we want to hear from everybody. And I'm pretty good at calling on people if they don't respond. So we'll just be prepared for that. But I want to let you know, good news. RMI and Maryland MEP and a bunch of manufacturers like Antoine went to Annapolis this year to ask for a bill to create a fund for manufacturers to purchase 4.0 technologies. Now, you all know what 4.0 is, so I'm not going to get involved in that. We didn't have that. Well, we had a pilot program, but we didn't have a program that was designed the way that we thought it should be done. The bill was introduced by Delegate Lily Shee, who also served as the head of a legislative work group on manufacturing that many of us were on. And so that was the recommendation. It passed. We're waiting for the governor to sign it. There'll be more details, but essentially it will allow people to apply for matching funds for 4.0 technology. And there's a real focus and emphasis on companies with 50 or fewer employees. In fact, 20% of the funds that have been allocated will go to companies with 50 or fewer employees. So, Andy, that should resonate well with your folks. So that's a good deal. I mean, a lot of people were hoping to get things out of legislature. We were wishing and praying, and actually surprised that we were able to do that. And it was done with bipartisan support, but the reality is the Democrats, and I'm not playing politics here, but the Speaker of the House and the Senate President and Guy Gazzone and Atterbury, they all were there to help get this bill through. So we're real happy about that. There'll be more out about that, because we want you to apply. It'll be managed by the Maryland Department of Commerce, but we need you to think about applying for that. So at this time, before I turn it over, I have a quiz for the group, okay? I'm going to ask you, who do you think gave this quote? And the quote is, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Ford.
Ford.
Yeah.
Master of quotes.
And I like to, and that's where I am in my ripe old age. You got to be thinking about what's next. And that's, again, Betamore, what's next. You got to be thinking about what's next. These folks here represent forward-thinking organizations and companies. The type of technologies that I've discovered, and I'm still learning every day, that are coming on the scene will fundamentally change the way in which you organize to do work. I think one day a week should be dedicated for people to learn about artificial intelligence, because it's going to create a tsunami of change. And it's really, really important to keep up with that, or else you're going to be out of business. but you can be in a booming business with it. So we want to talk about manufacturing today and technology. So I want to start, and would each of you just introduce yourself, and then we'll start with the general question of, what are some of the new technologies that you've adopted, and what are some of the challenges that have occurred in your attempt to bring new technologies to the workplace? So Antoine?
Yeah. Hello? Okay.
And introduce yourselves too.
Yeah, I'm Antoine Hutchinson, CEO of Betamore Technologies. We're a custom metal manufacturer located in Halethorne, Maryland.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andy Cook. I'm the Executive Director at Made in Baltimore, a program of the Baltimore Development Corporation, local branding initiative supporting small makers and craft manufacturers in Baltimore City.
Hey everyone, my name is Audrey Vandycastle. I'm the Director of Digital Transformation for Stanley Black & Decker. My team oversees sort of the intersection of the shop floor and technology for all of our manufacturing and distribution centers globally. So my team works with software and hardware projects, and we try to have fun when we're doing it.
Okay. Again, what are some of the challenges of adopting technology in the manufacturing industry, and what are some of those technologies?
Well, I guess one of the challenges, the biggest challenge is getting your people to buy into it, right? In other words, like, this is not the way you did it in the past, but this way will work better.
You're talking about your employees?
Yeah, your employees, yeah. I mean, if, like the older employees, it's like they've done things the same way the entire time, and it's worked well like that. Why should I change? And then, but the interesting part is when you show them the technology, when they actually use the technology and see that they're getting the same parts done at a quarter of the time, they love it. But it's like the initial just reluctance, because change is always hard, right? You do things differently. We always think like it worked like fine just like this, so why would we do something differently? That's like the biggest challenge I've experienced with the technology. And some of the advantages, I mean, the advantages are numerous. I mean, they take the human element out of the equation in most cases. Like things you have to calculate yourself. You have to, figure out how to do the setups. The computers do it for you. I mean, it's almost like it's so much easier to learn this stuff, and it does it so much like it's like automatically. You can pretty much teach anyone that wants to learn the newer technologies, whereas the older stuff would take a lot longer to learn it. You might have to apprentice for 6, 12 months, blah, blah, blah. The newer technologies, the companies bring it in, they train you, and then within within 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 weeks, you're running the technology, which is a huge advantage, actually.
As you were talking, I'm reminded of a statement that you made once before at a meeting where he said, technology is a great equalizer. And do you want to talk about that just for a second? Because I thought it was such a profound statement in terms of opening doors of opportunity for women and minorities. Yeah,
exactly. Technology is the ultimate equalizer in that you're starting from a level playing field. In other words, like there's no, like the person's been the steam fitter has been a steam fitter their entire life, and their father was a steam fitter, and their grandfather was a steam fitter. They're going to have a major advantage over someone who wants to get into, let's say, the steam fitting industry. But like the newer technologies, if someone wants to learn how to, like, for instance, like we had our laser, we had a guy running our laser that was like he barely had a high school diploma, but he's running like a $500,000 piece of equipment and producing parts that are accurate to within 0.005 accuracy, which is 0.005 is less than the thickness of a piece of paper. So you can imagine this guy's like just running this equipment. The company trains, and he's doing this stuff. Whereas that guy would not have. He'd probably be. He would be making some low wage job somewhere else, probably because of his age and his experience level. But for us, he's making $20-some an hour running an advanced piece of equipment. And also, like, for us, we have we try to have like a diverse workforce. So like the women who are typically underrepresented in manufacturing, the women are actually like our best employees as far as like we have a young woman that's programs the laser, programs our punch presses, and they're able to do it because the technology, like especially the younger people, they grow up with technology. Like if you're like my age, I'm almost 50. Like we didn't necessarily grow up with technology. I didn't get my first computer until I got to college, but these younger people, they're holding like a supercomputer in their hands at the age of like 9. So the technology, they pick it up really, really fast, which is something that which gives them a like I said, it levels the playing field.
Yeah. Thank you. So Andy, you got a different perspective because you have a lot of different types of small manufacturers and very diverse products. So is there something that can kind of capture the state of technology with that group of makers?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that when you talk about what the challenges of adopting new technology are for our group, it's access, right? It's accessibility of, a lot of these machines, these robots cost a ton of money, more money than our businesses have. So that's why legislation like what you referenced earlier is, I think, going to be very helpful for that kind of business. And we do see people taking advantage of things like maker spaces where they can, get their hands on a laser cutter or a CNC router or something like that to start prototyping in more kind of advanced ways. But we also see a lot of our companies are still using technology, but it's not new. They're using sewing machines and bottling machines and things like that, and those are still sometimes difficult to access as well. Like canning lines are cost prohibitive for a lot of small businesses. So we see that primarily as the challenge. How do we get these resources into the hands of small businesses to allow them to scale?
So that's the other thing in talking about manufacturing, and I see a lot of folks here that I typically see at RMI events too. And one of the things that we always like to point out is that unlike other industries, when you say the word manufacturing, it's like gummy bears. They all look alike, but when you bite into them, we're all different. So whether they're big ones or little ones or what have you. With Stanley Black & Decker, you typically think big, but one of the things I've learned about working with Stanley Black & Decker is that they are a big company, but they're connected with a lot of smaller companies. So Audrey, you have the advantage of kind of knowing the challenges for both small companies and large companies. So what's it? And by the way, Stanley Black & Decker is a 4.0 company. They are huge in this arena. I've been up to Connecticut. They have a manufacturer up there. It's amazing. But go ahead.
Yeah. I think that there's the word Industry 4.0 is almost a trigger word for me a little bit. I think that there's definitely challenges with implementing 4.0 technologies, especially in a business. I imagine in a small business, right? Mm-hmm. Cost prohibitive. But in a large business, it's also a little bit cost prohibitive. And the complexity of an organization like Stanley Black & Decker, where we're making hardware, we're making product, we've got 150 manufacturing locations around the world. A lot of them, we bought the parent company, and then we left the plant alone because it was spitting out product, right? So you would think everyone uses Wi-Fi. Nope. You would think everyone's on the same Wi-Fi network. Nope. You'd think we'd have our assets connected where we can get data from them. Some of them are, some of them aren't, right? I've been to some of our plants where we've got 6,000 people in Mexico assembling drills, and then I've been to plants in Tennessee where they've got 100 people welding under tarps, right? So we really run the gamut. And so for a large organization like Stanley Black & Decker, the complexity of implementing some of these technologies when you're looking at a plant that makes backhoe buckets for Caterpillar, and then a plant that makes, drills that go to Home Depot, you're dealing with lots of different types of customers. So for us, it's the complexity and the infrastructure that goes around enabling these types of technologies so that we can really see the value from them. So in some regards, we've got some great Industry 4.0 technology, but then in some regards, we're starting at the foundation, right? And I think a lot of manufacturers feel a little behind the curve when it comes to technology and being able to access it, just because of that complexity and those hurdles that are there that prevent us. So it's really awesome to see programs like this funding to give people an opportunity to try this out. And I think, just like you were saying, Antoine, is like, once you start using it, you really start seeing the benefit of it, right? And I think that manufacturers, people that work with their hands, makers, that's what they need to do to believe, is actually get their hands on it and utilize it and see how it benefits them. It's really hard to say from a PowerPoint slide, oh yeah, that technology is going to transform my shop floor, right? It's a crew of seers and doers that have to do it to believe. So I think that's definitely a big hurdle for it.
And although you're focusing on manufacturing, I think your statement applies to every industry, and I know from experience it applies to public policy makers. One of the tough, going back to Henry Ford or Steve Jobs, essentially they went against the grain because they didn't ask people what you want. They figured out what they needed, and we're in a different era because the time that it took to transform the technology into reality was a lot. It was longer back then, whether it was, again, Ford or Jobs. Now it's happening at breakneck speeds. How many people saw that the 60 Minutes this week had that artificial intelligence show on? What'd you think of? Yeah, what did y'all think of that? Because it falls right into it really woke me up. Go ahead, Eric. Huh? Yeah. Why?
Well, just because they showed robots playing soccer and just
Yeah.
things that you just don't realize how advanced things are.
So let me explain that piece because it ties in with this is about the technology side, not about the people side. They had little robots that were on a playing field, kicking the ball, right? Kicking the ball, kicking the ball. They applied artificial intelligence. After 2 weeks, the artificial intelligence taught the robots how to only kick winning kicks. Follow what I'm saying? They had figured out over 2 weeks what doesn't work and what does work. And now when they turn on the button, they do the right thing all the time. So that's just one aspect of the speed thing that I'm talking about and the change stuff. And if you just start applying that to other arenas, it's tough.
Yeah,
but,
we use a software platform that has an AI in it, and we use it for training, right? And our AI that's in this platform makes knowledge more accessible for our employees. So I'm always a big fan of showing the positives of AI and how it can actually help, right? And that speed of iteration breathes innovation into honestly a very dusty, non-innovated space, which is manufacturing a lot of times. So this AI can translate with the click of a button. So now our employees that don't speak English as a first language, whose boss is trying to train them in English, can understand better, right? Or we've got the ability to ask this AI, how do I do this? And then she tells you, so we can keep our employees safer, more in the know. So I think that AI can be very scary, but it can also be very helpful, especially in these spaces.
Yeah, and I think it's still to be determined how useful it's going to be, but there are examples. I wasn't taking a side on it. One of the things I've learned with all this gray hair, there's some things you can't change or stop. And technology, our friend Eris Melissaratos wrote a book about technology and industry and civilization, and that's the history of the world. Technology is the history of the world. Go back to Flint Stone. It was some of the first technology, fire. So the difference is that we're in an entirely different era, and some of this technology will allow us to do. But first of all, it will allow Maryland and American manufacturing to compete worldwide. My good friend Susie Gans pointed that out to me, Lion Brothers. She said, Mike, if you put the technology that's out there in the hands of American manufacturers, we can compete with China. And I think that's a great prescription for American manufacturing and Baltimore manufacturing.
So we actually have jobs we've gotten from Taiwan and from China and that we're doing now because of the technology. So that's actually we're an example of that. There's one of our biggest customers actually was getting their parts done. We're getting their parts made in Taiwan just 2 years ago. And now we're making we're doing $500,000 a year business with these guys.
Yeah.
So just because but we could not have done that without the technology and the laser, we wouldn't be able to be competitive at all.
So what's the level? Thank you. What's the level for the group and your sphere of influence in dealing with businesses or even manufacturing? What do you have to say about technology and adopting technology? Maybe the perspectives we're offering, I think they're valid. But I'd like to hear from the audience. What are we missing, or what have you learned about? Any thoughts on that? I know we got some bright people in the room here. Go ahead.
One of my observations is that
Yeah, okay.
Just because we're recording it, so it's helpful. Thanks, I'll run the mic.
Hi. So one of my observations in trying to sift through technology, both hardware and software in the manufacturing sphere, is just how many different providers there are and how much competition there is in this space. You had mentioned iterations and within your organization, and it seems that these companies are all competing to win market share, and it is a bit dizzying when trying to evaluate technology and what is the best service provider, not for just right now, but also in the future.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
I think that there's definitely some of the ways that I try to approach choosing a software vendor or a hardware vendor is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And I would recommend a problem to solve that will make you more profitable, right? So like, you have a lot of machine downtime, right? Maybe you should start tracking that, right? So kind of honing in on what those problem statements are first is a way to kind of cut through at least some of the noise, right? And then also, I highly encourage talking to someone who isn't a salesperson at that company or a customer of that company to really understand what they can do for you. And also, I think personally, when I'm looking for vendors for this space, I don't want to work with someone who doesn't have experience in manufacturing. I experience a lot of sales pitches from people for manufacturing technology where I can tell that they have never stepped on a shop floor before. And I'm like, you assume that I have 5G Wi-Fi access next to this giant metal press, right? Please leave my inbox alone. But that, like, those are the types of things I look for in a vendor. I think there's a lot of BS vendors out there for technology in this space.
And I thank you. And also, when we had the legislative work group that had a lot of manufacturers on there, and I think your point was a point that was made by some of the members of the work group, and it's probably one of the most important challenges that I think we need to meet. And that is, how do we know what to buy? And in particular, because this stuff's expensive. And then the other part of that is, let's face it, we're asking people to make decisions about technologies that they don't really understand, okay? More importantly, they don't understand what's the implication if they were to buy something in terms of other parts of their organization. So one of the realizations we came up with was that ideally there would be some type of organization, vendor-free, that could advise companies objectively as to what might work for their specific situation, because it's really, really hard to figure out these technologies. It's not just one technology. I know I talked about artificial intelligence because I think that's going to be the driving one, but it doesn't matter. You know, if even just managing your data can be a huge challenge.
Well, I think this is a great opportunity for the role of the makerspace to come in and get some of these tools on site, have demonstrations, allow people to familiarize themselves with what these things are and learn about them in a more hands-on way. I think that's a great way that we could get some of the education into the hands of the local buyers.
And it may also help, like what Antoine was talking about, some of the older employers, forget the boss, just getting them to see what we mean when we say laser cutter or what we or 3D printer. We went to RMI and Maryland MEP, went down to Annapolis this year. Some of you know, every so many years we do 3D scans and prints of the heads of the legislator. I was shocked at how many, some people haven't seen 3D printers yet. It was the first time. Had no concept of 3D scanning. Anybody want to add to the comment? Yeah, hold on just a second.
Talking about the complexity of implementing software solutions and so on, the other issue is garbage in, garbage out. And that happens a lot. And there's a lot of things out there, a lot of really cool tools. If you don't know how to use it and you haven't had the training and haven't planned for it, you can spend all the money in the world. It's not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that one of the things that we're focusing on right now is building the muscle in our facility leaders. What do you do with this data now that you've got it, right? A lot of our plants, they collect on paper data, and then their supervisor takes it and they put it in a drawer, right? Not a lot of good it's doing you. Okay, yeah, we can digitize that collection for you, but if you don't know what to do with it, garbage in, garbage out, right? What's the point? So we're focusing a lot on some of those behavioral and educational things for the leaders in our site so they know what to do with this technology and how to actually benefit from using this technology.
Yeah. I see my friend George. Oh, I'm sorry. Who? Ed? Yeah. Okay, my friend Ed, too.
That's what I'm going to ask you now. So, thank you so much for all your tireless work on down to Annapolis, getting money for the industry and such. I wanted to ask you if there was much talk about education and K-12. I just came from a meeting earlier today where people were talking about how kids don't even know how to use tools. They can't even fix their own bike. However, I think there's a moment where a lot of these breaking technologies, should we put 3D printers in schools, should we teach CAD, it can be a game changer as those kids roll into the workforce.
One other piece of legislation to be aware of, Ed, is that OpenWorks has worked on with the state is they've made available funds to found or expand makerspaces. So there's grant funding available now where you can either put a makerspace in a school and get funding for it, right? And also technical expertise that you get with OpenWorks. So there is also great funding for technology and manufacturing available from the state of Maryland, but also now funding for expanding makerspace services in the state of Maryland, which I think is super needed to help especially schools that are often underfunded be able to get this technology into the hands of students.
I think that there's also, we sit on the Baltimore City Schools Manufacturing CTE Program Advisory Board. I think I recognize, yeah, there's a few faces in here from that. And a big challenge that they're having right now is just finding the educators to be in the schools who know how to use these technologies, who know manufacturing. So just a quick plug for anyone that has an inclination or a bent towards that. I believe they may have filled the position now, but there's a great need in the school system for people that know how to train on these types of things.
Yes, hold on.
A comment followed by a question. So I do a lot of machined parts, components, not so much the manufacturing, but design and having them made. And I've definitely noticed in Maryland that the majority of our high accuracy manufacturing is led by the military aerospace kind of industry, which is great. And we have some suppliers that do absolutely fantastic quality. But because they work in that territory, everything that they make goes through kind of the same process. So you have a large amount of overhead, everybody making sure that everything is basically DoD compliant. And then any smaller businesses come in and try and work with them, and you have that same overhead, and the tail gets really long. So like I can send a part to Illinois to be manufactured, and it'll be 1/8 the price of having it made in Frederick. And that's just the way that it is. And I'm generally familiar with the 4.0 concept of manufacturing, and I'd love to see kind of that tail shorten so that I can start working with more local suppliers, so I can start doing less in-house when I need to really get into accurate stuff. And I don't know exactly how this is all going to wash out, but that's kind of the thing that drives me out of the area when I'm buying parts, is just that you know, the part's $50, and the fact that I did it with this company is $450. And that's just the way it is, because it has to go through like 20 different people, and all those people get paid $150K a year to sign off on things. Anyways, so then comment, startup, aerospace world, we do a lot of small volume, high accuracy stuff. We could really use a lot of equipment. I've looked at like the previous test grant, but like it didn't really apply to us. And I'd be really curious about the people that were involved in kind of creating it, if they see any ways in for small organizations that do like reductive processes or anything high value. We do a lot of carbon, a lot of aluminum, and some super high accuracy steel components. And you know, normally I'm looking at it and it's like how to revolutionize an entire shop floor, and that's really interesting. But like, you know, we could just use a couple of machines and then start from the beginning in kind of a 4.0 area, instead of just buying old equipment out of the Midwest as factories get shut down, training people how to do it manually, and then maybe transitioning in 10 years. Anyways, that was my question.
Are you a machine shop?
No, we're a aircraft development group, but we have a lot of machining capabilities that we want to send.
Anybody have an answer for him?
I think that reductive manufacturing is not going anywhere and is under the umbrella of Industry 4.0. I think that the notion that additive is like coming for reductive manufacturing is ill-informed, personally. So I would say apply. What's the worst they're going to do? Tell you no, right? I would say CNC machine sounds like 4.0 to me.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
So are you doing like CNC? I mean, like, actually, just answer the question. You're looking for CNC mills. What are you looking for as far as equipment?
I mean, I'm kind of curious on what we can get, but a CNC mill would be wonderful for us.
Throw a robot in there to tend it, then it's really 4.0.
Yeah, exactly. But a CNC mill, like getting across mini mill is not 4.0. That's like 2.0 or something.
Sure,
but,
it is.
But the software to run it might be though 4.0. That's the,
Yeah, exactly.
You're saying,
You could sell that for sure.
yeah, no, you could definitely. I mean, yeah.
So,
And by the way, I have the same complaint about Maryland manufacturing. It's really like to get anything done, it's like you have to go out of state to get, like because everything is so defense. Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, But you can get my card because we'll do it for you. We'll do it for you. We don't have those. I don't have those big markups for the stuff that doesn't need it.
there is a company over in Montgomery County called Exometry, and they have a national network. They're on my board, so I got to promote them. Yeah, Randy and his team are really good. So, excuse me. Russ.
Also, Send, Cut, Send, if you haven't used them before.
They rule.
Send, Cut, Send. Descriptive company name. You send it to them, and then they cut it, and then they send it
They're
back to you
awesome.
or something.
How rude.
So,
Send, Cut, Send is local. They're not local, but they're U.S. based for sure.
so
Their turnaround times, no way it could be China.
I want to get back to Ed Mullen for a second because I think we may have partially responded to your question, if I understood it. Yours seemed to be more global, correct, in terms of education global. Was there a conversation about that?
Well, about aligning the school system more closely with the jobs of the future. I love the makerspace idea. I think makerspaces and shared spaces like libraries are much better use than trapping expensive equipment inside schools where only a few kids get to use them. However, general manufacturing concepts like vinyl cutting or jewelry making or even baking. There's a new cheesecake company here in Baltimore that I'm pretty excited about, Hiatus Cheesecake.
I was just over there this week. Great product. Back to real quick on the legislative work group, there was some very back and forth conversation about education, particularly with CTE and some of the manufacturers on the work group. We're feeling that the system isn't meeting the needs of the industry, and that it's kind of like Henry Ford. We're tired of old solutions, old approaches to solving new solutions. And that was, but at the same time, there's a lot of money in there from the Kerwin Commission to help promote, the kind of things that we need.
You want to make sure that the schools are training in these new technologies, pay your taxes.
Well timed.
Well, I will say, I know that Mike Grubbs out in Baltimore County Public Schools, he's got 2 AI classes going right now, which I thought was kind of forward thinking.
I think that what you were talking about a little bit earlier, Mike, about bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., right? The only option to compete with the labor costs that are cheap in other locations that aren't the U.S. is by implementing things like AI or automation, right? And what I think is really interesting is that that job landscape is transforming. We might not need somebody to assemble stuff because we've got a robot assembling it, but now we need somebody who can do maintenance on a robot and who knows how to program a robot, right? So I think that the industry, the skill sets that are needed are changing so rapidly, and legislation and education are so slow to shift with that landscape that it's been really challenging, I think, for people to be able to keep up. But I think that hearing things about an AI class in a high school, exciting.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's kind student.
There are glimmers of hope. There are glimmers of hope. I want to go back here and ask my friend George a question. You know I was going to do this. George is in a different world. He's not a manufacturer, okay, but he's dealt with a lot of companies, and he's in his current job, he's dealing with a lot of companies that are doing well. So George, could you make some comment about the discussion about technologies with the companies that you're dealing with? Is it a point of discussion with these companies when you're investing in them or things like that? I know there's a lot of conversation about what banks are investing in depending on how well a company is suited to face the future.
I'll try. Well, actually, I was sitting here listening to the conversation, Mike, and we've been around a few years, and I've noticed I've had the great experience of watching great technology shifts take place just in the last 40 years, right? So when I started working at Westinghouse Electric, pre-Northrop with Eris, hell, we were just transitioning from analog to digital, right? And it created a whole new swarm of technology, throughput, computing power, that really changed the world dramatically. And then I had the luxury to get involved in a startup during the dot-com era in the wireless and mobile space, right? So you talk about a change in technology and shift in the world. But these things were all dominated by big companies, right? So mobile and wireless, Apple, right, became a $1 trillion company from wireless devices. And then I ran a public company that was Autodesk's largest reseller back in the 90s. So I got involved in CAD and CAM and saw the shift taking place there with design features that were amazing. But what I've seen recently being in the last 10, 12, 15 years, is the democratization of access to this technology. So it's not controlled by all these large companies. They're still winning and they do well, but smart people are getting access to great technology like AI and machine learning and things, and we're seeing the evolution of some really great things come out. So yeah, I'm an investor, for example. I run a venture fund, and seeing some of the shifts in technology and what they're leveraging this technology to do in manufacturing, in healthcare, and all these spaces is really intriguing. But I love the fact that it's been democratized more, and more people have access to the tools to do pretty amazing things. So it's been a great run.
Yeah, I'm looking around the room, and the age difference will determine what you've lived through, And so, well said. Michelle, do you have a comment?
We've heard this a lot, Mike, that manufacturing, at least in the state of Maryland, is dead or dying, and the challenge of competing. And you alluded to this, Audrey, but competing, not so much competing with China, but competing with particularly the southeast part of the country where energy costs are a lot lower, labor costs are lower. So how do we position Maryland to be competitive when we know that the cost of doing business might be higher than some of these other areas of the country, but we have other advantages? I mean, it's a perception issue.
I've been doing this for a long time, and remember the good old days when Bethlehem Steel was, so I'm from Dundalk, so I knew the benefit. And the reason why I've done what I've done for 30-some years, I've never worked in manufacturing a day in my life, but manufacturing is an instrument of social change. It gave people the opportunity to be part of the middle class. I saw that. Unfortunately, younger folks here never saw that. You saw the demise of that. And that's sad because it is hard. But even older folks don't have the belief sometimes that we can bring it back because they don't understand. But I do believe, and I think you could substantiate this, that we have new tools for getting there. I'm going to go back to my Betamore. Let's be optimistic. It's not dead. We just haven't had the folks rally around manufacturing to put together the plan of action that'll get us there. Now, I think right now in America, we've come to the realization that we cannot afford any longer to have everything made overseas. That's very clear. So I think that's one factor that's going to allow manufacturing to come back. Technology clearly will make a difference. What infuriates me is Maryland gives itself credit for being innovative and smart. Well, if we're innovative and smart, and we've got a highly educated workforce, why can't we create a national showcase for next generation American manufacturing? We have the talent and we have the technology. Perception has held us back an awful lot.
I'd also say to that question of, how do we compete? I think we need to be thinking about regional specialization. Like, what does the Mid-Atlantic do that the Southeast Atlantic doesn't do? I think there's a lot of, you can look at examples in a lot of different parts of the world where they've really doubled down on like regional specialties. And I think that that's something that we should be thinking about, creating like a regional manufacturing ecosystem. It's not all going to happen here in Baltimore or even Maryland, but what do we have around that we can piece together and make our expertise?
I'd like to talk more about that.
Yeah, just as a side note, so one of the big issues everybody hears about is the chip manufacturing. It's a big issue. We can't get it done. It's being manufactured mostly in Taiwan and in Korea and China. There's actually, to that point, there is a group at the University of Maryland that's trying to get a regional group, consortium, I guess, to try to get chip manufacturing in Maryland. And so I think you're 100% correct that we should not completely blind ourselves to purely Maryland. There are more opportunities.
I think Maryland's also carved out a very unique space in the maker realm, right? I think that Baltimore and Maryland have really pioneered the right or a working model for a makerspace, which is an entry point for a lot of people into manufacturing and the trades, especially for people that aren't traditionally introduced to manufacturing and the trades, women, people of color, those types of people. And so I think that the maker movement within Maryland has made a lane for Maryland to really be known as kind of that incubator and startup place that could be better leveraged working with the power of manufacturing.
I'll say one other point too about that the innovative and kind of like maker movement here is the company GoDaddy, the web domain hosting company, runs a program called Empower, helping to get small businesses websites. Obviously, it's creating customers for them. It's a good thing. They chose Baltimore to come and run this program for, I believe, a 3-year commitment. And they chose it because their GoDaddy, they have all kinds of like, insider information about where businesses are and where they lack web presence. And they saw that Baltimore has an extremely dense entrepreneurship per capita going on here that they didn't see in other cities around the country. And so I think that's another thing that we should be thinking about. How do we focus on supporting that aspect of what's going on here? Because maybe we're not going to, again, be competitive with like the power or labor rates of the South, but we might have the new businesses that are going to start up and get acquired.
There are other states that manufacturing is growing that are in the North and in the Midwest. So it's not all in the South. It's all different. I think behind all the success stories, for the most part, are people that believe that they can achieve a goal by creating a manufacturing base. I really do. I mean, I don't care if it's manufacturing or educational systems or anything. You got to have a group of people that believe they're going to have an all-star team, and that just hasn't happened in Maryland. I mean, when we had Ayers as the Commerce Secretary, and I happen to know Ayers. I mean, I know his heart was in that, but it's complicated. It's complicated. I would say, I would encourage everybody to do this, to measure up what you're advocating for and try to say, what does this equal in terms of good paying jobs and benefits for average folks? If we're not focused on manufacturing for the good of people, I know I'm going to retire then. So, yes, sir.
Hey, Betamore, July. So I actually want to follow up on that comment about the jobs that are created, because I listen to these discussions around advanced manufacturing, and maybe I might be missing the link, but it seems to me that as we are doing more automation in some of these, the co-robotics, that the narrative is around, yeah, we just need to retrain people to be able to run the robots, but unless I'm missing something, it seems like inevitably there will be less jobs that are created as a result of that. And so I'm trying to understand, what am I missing here? Because if I needed 10 people to run a manufacturing assembly line, and now I can use one robot or a co-robotic, function with one person that runs a robot, then you still eliminate 4 jobs.
I have the same concern, but this guy tells me it's not true.
I would love to give a tangible example. So part of my team, not my direct team, but my larger team, goes into our plants and they do what's called line balancing, where they look at a line and they see how many people are on it, and they say, wow, this line has 18 people on it, and we could actually eliminate 3 of those roles and make it 15 people. So now our labor cost is lower and we're making a better margin on our product, right? In that same facility, they have 100 jobs open that they can't fill. So what do? They take those 3 people that they cut off that line because of an automation that's there or because of a line balance, and they put them in those open roles. And those open roles tend to be stuff like material movement or a different line or another shift, right? So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for jobs, especially in US facilities. It's really hard for us to find labor. And so when we have a bajillion open roles, we're not slashing jobs, we're just moving them within our facility. There's a lot of work to be done and not enough people to go around to do it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also like it was said earlier, so you have like the robots, you still need someone to fix the robots. So maybe like she was saying, the jobs shift, or you need someone to program the robot instead of actually, the operator doing the setup himself at the piece of equipment. Someone's doing it, someone's programming in the office, and that's actually higher wage. Eventually, when, far in the future, when robots can do everything, then no one's gonna have a job. But that's gonna be the case where when AI completely takes over, they probably have AIs playing sports and stuff against each other. But that we're far from that right now. I mean, the more technology we get, the more people we need to hire because it produces parts faster. So now you still need the back end people to process those parts. So we're a long way from robots taking over, I think.
I grew up in a family business in New Jersey, and in the 70s and 80s where automation was just coming, and the mindset of most entrepreneurs, my dad's not with us anymore, he was a great entrepreneur, I believe, was as this automated, what's the next challenge? What's out there? What else can we go after? What else can we go after and grab and bring into our town and our place and create more jobs? So even though this got automated, it now frees all of us up and frees resources up to go after the next new thing, the next project.
Exactly. So, and we could also, like the automation, it allows us to reshore stuff. So like the work, the workers. So now workers that were doing stuff maybe in other countries, maybe those workers are out of work, but the United States workers are actually, have jobs now. Like the same stuff that like someone might make, $2 an hour in India or something like that doing, someone here. But they're making, 10 people are making, 20 parts an hour, and you have one person in the United States because of automation making 20 parts an hour with equipment. That one person in the United States is still making a good wage, and it's like because the work is. The United States can't fulfill its manufacturing, it can't get anywhere close to fulfilling its manufacturing needs right now. So the automation is the only way for us to do it ourselves. For us to get it done. So there's a lot of demand. There's a lot more demand that automation is not going to fill. At least not for a long time.
Yeah. I got a pop quiz on that question, on that issue. How many people on the Maryland Workforce Exchange, which shows jobs being advertised? How many jobs are currently, as of February of this year, how many manufacturing jobs were posted for Baltimore City? Just give me a number. Anybody got it? Huh? I'm sorry. For Baltimore City. Job openings.
10.
Huh? 1,800. 1,800 jobs in Baltimore City alone. In Maryland, it was 12,000 jobs. That 12,000 job for 1 month, that is usually 15,000. So what they're saying, it's well substantiated that we need people, and we lose money as a result of that. However, your point is well taken. There's no question that technology will displace workers from current jobs. I would never say that it doesn't, because it does. One way of dealing with that is to have more jobs available through more companies. I mean, it sounds like simple math, but if you don't need 30 people at company A machine shop, you only need 15. Let's get the support to create company B machine shop and keep them employed. But right now, our issue nationally is finding people. And what's so sad here in Maryland, it's one of the best paying industries in Maryland, but you just can't get people to come work for us. Michelle, it gets back to image, it gets back to people thinking manufacturing's dead. And also some people just don't want to work in manufacturing. If they met folks like the folks here, they might have a different perspective on that.
My favorite quote, I've talked to a lot of people in our plants, why do you want to work here? And this one lady really stands out in my mind. She says, I hate people. I don't have to talk to anyone. I can come in and not talk to anyone and I get paid. There's a great selling point, right? Gotta love it.
I see a lot of those on the factory floors I visit, yeah.
And the benefits, by the way, you might want to talk about them, but I was shocked. I looked at one time, we were working with HR directors, and they actually offer health benefits for your pets. So some of them do. Well, that's...
Not yet.
Yeah. And Dave, you made a good point, and that's what we're so proud of, right? In Maryland, we are innovators. We are. There's no question in other industries. And that's the challenge. Pioneers. Pioneers will win. And I think, you know, when you have this kind of disruption going on, everybody likes talk about disrupted until it hits them. Then they're uncomfortable. But the reality is that's how we grow. And this is an old guy talking to younger people. Man, you've got a great opportunity, you know, to prove yourself in a new society that's emerging. Any other comment, Michelle? Hold on a second. She beat you. Okay. Hold on. You didn't see her. She was first.
I think thinking of these labor shortages right now, and also the way that the labor market in manufacturing is mostly older, what can we do to make sure that the knowledge that these experts have on the floor isn't lost when they retire? How can we capture that?
The answer is technology. As a millennial, I want to work somewhere that has technology. And I can't blame a millennial for not wanting to go into a shop floor that's still doing stuff on paper. So the platform that I talked about a little bit earlier about it that has an AI is a video platform that lets our employees on the shop floor capture the expert that's been there for 40 years on video. And when they retire, we still have that expert at their machine doing what they know best, right? So I think that technology has been a really powerful way for us to help capture that institutional knowledge that exists, that is super valuable in a way that's easy and not time consuming. I don't know about other manufacturers, but writing an SOP is typically not in the top 10 things that you need to do that day. So SOPs probably are very old and outdated or not very accurate and useful anymore. And I don't know about you, but if I went to learn a new thing and someone handed me a piece of paper with steps on it, I'd be like, oh, is there a video I can watch, right? So using technology is a great way to not only capture that and mitigate that risk of that knowledge leaving, but also attract younger people. Hey, I've had interns last year who their entire job was going to a plant and filming people. You're working with technology and manufacturing, right?
I would comment on it too. Like the way you keep the old knowledge is you don't need it anymore because technology takes over. Like it's like do you know how to use a cassette recorder? You don't, not because you don't need to, right? Because it doesn't exist anymore. As the newer technologies come in, the older technologies are obsolete and irrelevant. So that's another. Like I'll give you an example. Like I have a piece of equipment in my company. It's a punch press, and the punch press is maybe 25 years old, right? Still runs well, right? But the buttons are all worn out, right? So only the guy who runs the punch press knows how to set up the punch press, right? Because it's like I can't go over there. I'm like, okay, what button is this? Like it's like okay, you get hit F2. Which one is F2? What's that one right there? How would you know that? There's no more support for that machine. There's no more like the company stopped supporting the machine I think 10 years ago, right? It's like when that guy retires, that equipment's out of service. But the laser does 5 times the amount of parts that the punch press can produce, and it takes 1/10 the time to program it. So I could train the same guy that's running the punch press, learn how to use the punch press. He apprenticed in the company for years. Little by little, he learned how to use the punch press. Someone's using a laser. We got 2 weeks of training. They're running a laser, producing quality parts much faster and much more accurately than the punch press. So to answer your question, and also but to the question about as far as how do you get younger people to just make it more glamorous, right? Now, right now, manufacturing has a stigma that it didn't have years ago. Manufacturing years ago had a stigma okay, I have a good manufacturing job. That was the thing to be proud of. I worked for Ford. I worked on the assembly line. Now it's oh, I got to get my hands dirty, which is which doesn't really appeal to the younger folks. So the way that we do it at FabPro is we just make it okay, this is the technology. These are the positives. You get to run this laser. You get to do this great technology. It's really about perception. Everything is about perception, right? So if you perceive it as something that somewhere you want to work, marketing, it comes out of marketing, right? How do you market? How is it marketed to younger people?
I have a kind of different perspective on that also. We work with a company that primarily makes sewn products, bags, a lot of different luggage and duffel bags, things like that. And some of their best machines are 60, 70, 80 years old. And they still run great, and the only reason that they still run is the owner knows how to fix them. And what he's very much engaged in right now is teaching. He's works at OpenWorks, teaches a lot of their sewing classes, is the driving force behind a whole workforce development program that we've got going there. So I would say that mentorship and apprenticeship are things that we also need to be really focused on in order to make sure that knowledge does not always get lost. Because, yeah, sometimes the technology improves, but sometimes the old stuff still works great and can do good.
Okay, thank you. Can we thank our panel for tonight? Nice job. Very nice job. Very good. And thank you all. I think there's still more refreshments. Any other announcements, Kim? We're good.
So we're going to be hosting our third Thursday next month on May 18th. I think that's what the third Thursday is, at Baltimore Peninsula. And we're not honing in on a specific topic next month. It's really going to be focused around hearing from some seasoned entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs, just hearing war stories, if you will. I forget what the title is. But yeah, so we would love to invite you. Look for information about that next week. And guys, thank you so much.